episode. Today we have Mr. Smith, Cindy Liu, and of course our guest, Mr. Keeley.
Mr. Keeley, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. I'm Pat Keeley. I'm the superintendent of Mountain Empire Unified. I don't know what else you want to know. Looking at myself in this, I realized I was out in the wind and my hair is a disaster. What hair I have. But I'm here and I'm excited to talk with you.
And I would like to ask, how did you become a superintendent and why?
So it's interesting because I never aspired, I guess, to this role when I first got into education. I just wanted to be a history teacher and coach some basketball. And along the way, I've had a lot of really great mentors that saw abilities in me and pushed me along the way to different leadership roles. And that's kind of how the career path, I guess, evolved. And when I think about it, it's really, the job is a what. What do you want to be, or what did you become in a job? But really, your job should align with who you are. And so people saw in me some abilities to lead and encouraged me along the way. As far as becoming a superintendent, how did I become one? Prior to working in the Mountain Empire School District, I worked in a larger all high school district and served as both an assistant principal and a principal of a very large, 2,000 student high school, and then worked in alternative ed and did that as an alt ed administrator. And then I came to Mountain Empire. And along the way, in a smaller school district, you take on a lot of other responsibilities, a lot of other tasks. And so it became, even as the principal of the high school there was a lot more tasks to do. And I learned a lot along the way. And then again, had a great mentor who kind of pushed me into this role as she retired. She really strongly advocated for me to move into this role. And, beyond that, my colleagues, my fellow principals and administrators within the Mountain Empire District really advocated for me taking this leadership role.
What are your favorite parts of being a superintendent?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm only 5 months into the job. And so right now, to choose favorite parts might be kind of difficult. I've always I've always advocated that and had the position that education is the people business. There's no other business that is like ours. And the people, the kids, and the challenges along the way are all intriguing to me. The problem solving, those are some of the better challenges and things along the way, and the variety. Like right now, I'm sitting in the office at one of our elementary schools because I'm serving as the principal of an elementary school for a week because that principal is not available to come in. And so we reopened for in-person instruction this week. And so here I am being an elementary principal. So
There's like a lot of variety in your job, huh? Because like you never know like what's gonna happen and then you just like have to go with the flow, I guess, huh?
You better be able to, for sure,
Yeah.
be able to roll with what's thrown at you. So for example, I went to bed last night with a number of notifications from SDG&E because it's so windy out here that they were going to shut down power. So then I had to wake up at 4 a.m. to see whether they were going to shut down power, whether they did, to decide whether or not we were going to come to school. They did not shut down power. So I went back to bed for an hour and was woken up by the director of transportation, who was telling me about a car accident which was impeding traffic. Therefore, all of our buses, or 3 of our buses, were not able to go pick up their kids on time. And so that's just how, the last 12 hours of of my job went. So there's a lot of different things that happen along the way, and that's where the leadership piece comes in. You really need to know how to navigate stressful decisions and stressful situations, and provide people guidance.
Where did you go to college?
Well, I started out, that's a really good question for a young person. I started out, I would say I went to college at University of Laverne, uh, but I went to school at Cal State San Marcos. And what I mean by that is I was 18 and I probably wasn't as mature as I needed to be to move off to college. And I wasn't all that successful at first. Um, and so after about 3.5 years of floundering and trying to maintain a place to live and go to college, I really couldn't balance it very well. And so I moved back to San Diego. And then at that time, Cal State San Marcos was like 2 buildings. They were still building, they were actually blowing up the mountain while we were in class. Um, they would have very large explosions while you were sitting in class there. And so I did my bachelor's degree there, got my teaching credential through National University, and then did my master's and my doctorate work at San Diego State. Go Aztecs. So,
And what other kinds of jobs did you have before working in education?
um, for the most part, well, the 3 I would say I had in young adulthood was at a grocery store and a bank, and then a lot of time in the restaurant industry, waiting tables and working through that.
What advice would you give to to students wanting to go down your career path?
Um, it's an interesting thing because I think you need to make sure you're in it for the right reasons. Uh, you're not a, you know, you're. I would say focus on the kids and make sure that um, you are in touch with your core values, who you are, and as a person, what your belief is about learning and students and working with people, and oftentimes working with people that you don't necessarily always agree with. Um, because there's a variety of people. It's public education, so there's a variety of people that walk through the door, and uh, a wise person once said to me, you don't have to like everybody, but you got to get along with them. And so, so, and that was actually a parent who I used to butt heads with a lot. But if you're going down this career path, focus on your core values and what your beliefs are about kids and learning and the purpose of school. It's not always about getting a test score. It's not always about A's and B's. It's learning is about growth and reflection. So
And what is the best advice you have ever received?
um, focus on problems, not personalities. That would be something that I think a lot of people in leadership roles would benefit from. If you've watched our political leaders really over the last number of years, but there's plenty of examples in the last couple of weeks here. But uh, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the challenge ahead of us? And if you're focusing on a difficult personality one way or another, um, then you're going to lose sight of solving the actual problem that you need to solve. And that's, I mean, again, come back to education. It's the people business. And so there's challenges, and often those challenges are, possibly differences of opinion on how to help someone. So
Like maybe you can focus on the things that you like about the person instead of focusing on like what you dislike about the person.
yeah, there's certainly that. I mean, if more people had take the time to actually talk to each other, um, they'll tend to find out that they have more in common than they don't. But let's say it's we're trying to solve, on a kid level. If you're in school, oftentimes the problem is possibly something that happened in a classroom, or something about a grade, or something of that nature. And so I could have a kid walk in and go, well, that teacher is a jerk. And I could have a teacher come in and say, that kid's acting this way. And really, what's the problem? Is it the behaviors? Is it a reaction to something? And so if you find out that it's a reaction to something, then we got to figure out, well, what is a student reacting to? What is the teacher reacting to? And try to solve those things, because it's very easy for us to go after who or how that person's behavior is, or what they might have said, versus what they might have done. And what they might have done might be the problem you need to solve. That's like an interpersonal piece. If it's a larger budgetary piece, or in my role, I have a school board. And so while I'm the superintendent of the district, and every employee eventually leads to me as far as my decision-making process, I actually have 7 bosses that I answer to. And so, for example, if a board member has a question about something, recently at a board meeting, a board member wasn't happy about an expenditure, had some questions about it. And you can either do one of two things. You could say, well, that board member is a jerk and he doesn't do ... Or you can go, okay, maybe my communication wasn't very good on why we needed to spend this money, or why we needed to make this decision. And so that comes back to being a leader, and coming back to being self-reflective. And at the same time, what's the problem? It's not the personality. It's what was the problem? The problem was a communication issue. And so, you bring it back next month, and it was approved this last Tuesday. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, I guess.
And can you describe a day in the life of a superintendent?
Yeah, it's kind of nuts at times, to be honest with you. Recently, in the last, my job has turned into this, into looking at people on a screen and talking. I mean, this last Monday was the first time I hadn't had a Zoom meeting since March. Was like first work day I have not had one Zoom meeting, probably save for high school graduation. Graduation day we didn't do a Zoom meeting, but so there's, in my job, sometimes I jokingly say I just take my brain to meetings. And so on a typical day, first thing I'll do is kind of clear through my email and make sure there's nothing urgent I have to get to. I spend an enormous amount of time reading at work, at times, because, like, for example, before this, like, the state just gave us another 51-page document updated on guidance for schools in the time of COVID. So I'm combing through that document right now to make sure that if there are improvements or adjustments we need to make, that we get that done. So there'll be a portion of my day that I'm reading the latest guidance from the state, whether it be COVID or whether it be another regulation that I need to know about, and provide guidance. Other parts of my day might include human resources issues, could be negotiating contracts with our teachers union or a classified union. It could be, sitting with our assistant superintendent of business and going through budgetary processes. Could be what I'm doing today, which is being an elementary school principal, or just heading to, I do try to carve out time where I'll drive to some of our schools and visit and check in. And then there's standing meetings throughout the week. We have once a week, all of our principals are online, and we meet and talk and kind of give updates. Every Friday I meet with all of the superintendents in the county and get a briefing from the county superintendent, and then go through a couple other things, and then we get into kind of chat rooms and catch up with each other and what's going on in the different school districts. And then every Tuesday, right now, I have a standing meeting with the county health and the education sector, and they give us briefings on COVID. So that's what's going on right now in my job. But it's my job is to provide leadership and guidance to the school district and make sure that we are executing our plan. And in the upcoming couple weeks, we're going to do a school board retreat where myself and the 7 board members are going to work with a consultant and lay out some new vision stuff. We have a $15 million construction bond, so I'm learning all about large scale construction and things like that. So it's a variety of things that go on. It's essentially, when you're a superintendent, you're the CEO of the district. So,
What are some pros and what are some pros and cons of being a superintendent?
Well, obviously, it's all the glory that we get has to be a pro, right? I mean, people are super excited when they get to talk with the superintendent. No, it's a great thing to have the opportunity to really lay out a vision and try to execute a plan. It kind of becomes, what is it that you like to do? And I like to help people. And even when I was a little kid, my mom used to kind of refer to me as I'm the youngest in my family, so I was kind of the diplomat, always kind of going in between my brothers and trying to make sure everything was resolved and good, and carry that kind of skill into my adult life. So that's kind of the pro, is that you get to kind of lay out the direction for the organization you work for. And the other thing is that, again, I go back to your core values, and as long as you are repeatedly focusing on what are your drivers, what are you making your decisions based on. We have 1,650 kids in our K-12 system. We have another 100, roughly 100 preschool students, and then we have 5 charter schools. Decisions I make affect people's lives, and so knowing that can be gratifying in a way, if again, I'm consistently focusing on my core values. Cons, it can be a lonely job, to be honest. I mean, I'm the only one that does it in this district, and I'm a little bit of everybody's boss, and so sometimes people get weird around me, because it's like all of a sudden I no longer become a person, I become a position. And that was something I realized very early on in taking this job. When you're a high school principal, it's a little bit like that. But when I took this role, I told my wife pretty quickly that I realized I'm a commodity to some extent, because people want your opinion on everything, or they want your presence at something. And then they almost, I get weirded out by it, because sometimes people get too differential, like I'm just a guy. People want to make sure they call me Dr. Keeley, and that's great and all that stuff, and I happy to have worked through that process to get a doctorate. But I've gone by Pat my whole life, and so that kind of stuff kind of gets weird. So I guess that would be the con. Come back to me in a year and see what's changed, because I've been like I said, I've only been on the job for 5 months. I guess one of the other things is again, being a position versus a person to people. People form opinions about you really quickly, no matter what you do. So whether we're closing schools or opening schools or any of that, some people can become keyboard warriors and decide what they want to say about me, on social media and things like that. So you have to develop a pretty thick skin, because people can be pretty awful. So I guess that would be the cons.
Yeah, like not caring like what other people think, like only caring like what like family members say, or like people that love you or really
Right.
know you, because
Right.
they don't
And
know you.
right. And again, I go back to that kind of developing a thick skin piece. One of our employees, stopped me recently, and she was, kind of upset because uh, someone, was on some social media really bashing me for not having schools open, and she's like, "You're doing a really good job. These are really difficult circumstances," and she was, trying, just feeling upset and whatever. And I had to tell her, I said, I can't go there with people. I mean, I've had actually in 5 months of this job, I've had one parent actually get a hold of me to talk to me about it. And that says a couple of things. One, our principals are doing a really great job talking with people and communicating with the public and the community. And two, there's a lot of people out there that want to sit behind their keyboard and say what they want to say, but they don't want to sit down and break bread with you and talk to you like a person and go, "Hey, what's going on?" And I can tell you, this is hard. The COVID stuff is hard on everybody, no matter what your situation
Mhm.
is. And so, in that regard, yeah, when you talk about, your family knows you, your friends know you, and you got to concentrate on that. There's that component. And then I'll go back to developing your core values. If you're making your decisions, and especially if you're in a leadership role, but in all facets of your life, whether it's how you work with your family and your friends and navigate those relationships, or whether, whatever job you wind up taking on, what are your core values? What are your core values? Um, and if you really develop and spend time thinking about what is it that's important to you and what's driving you, then, and you constantly go back to that as your center, you're going to be okay.
You can just tell them like thank you for like your opinion or
Well,
something like that.
um, normally, if someone wants to just spout off on social media, I don't go back and forth with people. I
Oh
don't.
no, I was talking like if they call you or something like that, or talk to you in
Yeah,
person.
yeah. There's definitely a customer service aspect to it. You try to find some identifiers in there. For example, I had a parent that one of my assistant principals at one point would come in and kind of gripe about and say, this person is really gruff on the phone. They're this, they're that, and then that parent came in and we sat down in my office, and I just said, you and I have something in common. And he said, "What's that?" I said, "We both want what's best for your daughter." And then at that point, it's kind of a disarming way to start. Okay, now let's have a conversation about what's going on with your kid at school and decisions that she might be making, and how we can help her navigate those better. Um, so you try to find those commonalities, and certainly, um, you're going to have those meetings with people and those times with people where you're going to do exactly what you're saying, and you're going to try to placate. You're going to try to make sure people understand that you're hearing them. um, and some people, they're still not going to be happy, and they're going to walk out. I've had to make some difficult decisions over my career, which certainly negatively can impact somebody. If I have to make the call to uphold or recommend an expulsion, that's a big deal. That changes the trajectory of a young person's life. And how you manage that situation along the way, how you treat people along the way, even when giving them bad news. um, it goes a long way to helping helping change that, the outcome. I mean, the outcome might be that that student is still expelled, but they might still walk out of there with a level of, I was respected along the way. And they might walk out of there with a level of, if I am in a situation where I have to be the person that makes a difficult choice or a difficult conversation with people, I need to treat them well either way, because they're a human being that's going through a difficult time. And I mean,
Yeah.
I've had to have conversations where I've let people go from a job, and I have to recognize along the way that, I'm going to, in that process, I'm a bad person to them. I mean, there's no way around it. I'm the person making this call. And B, I have to except that they're going through something now. They're going through a difficult time, and part of my role um, is to treat them with kindness, even though I'm having to make a difficult call. And that's kind of the burden, the burden of leadership.
Most of the time, like, they might see you as a bad person for, like, a little bit, but then they understand that it was hard to make the decision and that
Right.
things happen for a reason.
Right. And if again, I'll hammer it home if you have your values in line and you're constantly reflecting on why you're making decisions the way you do, um, you're gonna come out on top most of the time. And from an interpersonal and just your own self, you're gonna feel okay with it, even if you've had to make a difficult decision. And it doesn't have to be just in education; it could be in any job you do. Um, where you have to make decisions that do affect other people, and pretty much every decision you make affects somebody. If you have a family, it's going to affect them.
Yeah.
Your friends, your relationships, decisions you make along the way. And so as long as you're tying back um, to those things, more often than not, your path will continue to ascend.
Life has a lot of hard decisions that people have to make, but they always overcome it because everything always passes.
Well,
So,
that's true.
mhm.
That's true.
Anytime you're, like, in a hard time, it's not gonna be forever because it will pass, and then the hard time will pass and the good time will come.
Yeah. And I think, to that end, you stay positive along the way. Being positive doesn't mean you don't recognize the problem. It just means that you're positive, and that you have an outlook that is
Like
possibly,
seeing
possibly solution based.
like seeing it in a different light.
Correct.
Yeah, and then you also like refer a lot to like being in line with your like core values, and I also agree with that because whenever I guess I would make a decision depending on my values, I guess like there's always a factor where it does affect other people too, but then I
Hmm.
know that when I'm in line with my values, I'm like, okay, well, I did it depending on me, and it makes me feel more calmer instead of like freaking out like, oh, did I do right or did I do like bad or something like that. And I like you just make decisions depending on what you feel like was best. And
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah. I was leaving a school, and a teacher sent me an email, and she said, I didn't always agree with your decisions, but I never doubted once that you made those decisions on what was best for kids, what you believe was best for kids. And so to me, that was reassurance, a good way. And this is just something to think about along the way as you head towards career and things like that. As you get letters of recommendation from people for different things, save them. And then 10 years from now, look at those recommendations and see, are you still aligning with some of the things that somebody else saw in you? I can go back and pull recommendations from my first assistant principal. When I first tried that, and there's language similar from somebody in a lifetime past. 3 schools ago and 2 districts ago, somebody saw the same things that people see in me now. And so, to me, those are good ways to help reassure and to think about: am I drifting away from that? And that doesn't necessarily mean a core value, or some of those kind of benchmark parts of you don't necessarily mean that your belief systems or what you and how you change along the way, that like it doesn't make you unchangeable. And you shouldn't necessarily go, I'm going to write down my core values and then have
No, it's just like
7
the
pages
core.
of core values. It's just a few things. What are your guiding principles? But you learn along the way. I mean, for me, one of the biggest learning experiences of my life was transitioning from a large high school to alternative ed, a continuation school where, it was students who were pretty much disregarded from the education system. I went from a school with the sports and all these other things, and pretty high achieving overall general population of students, And then I went to a school where, you know, a third of the school was on probation and things. And it really was a very big learning experience for me because I had to not only think about what did I do in my previous job, um, and how did that work and what are the things that work there, and then those some of those things don't necessarily apply to that same student population that I was now working with, but what were the things that did, and it solidified a lot of my beliefs as an educator, and it really, I think, changed my trajectory in some ways. So um, you know, you should always be open to learning and changing, but you should always, you know, try to remain, you know, as if you're in this position and this profession, I would suggest you always are um, really thinking about what is it that you believe about learning, what is it that you believe about students, what is it you believe about the profession. Like sometimes for me, like about the profession, I love the education profession. And while having been a high school teacher and a high school principal and all those things, I know, I know to the core of the high school and teenage worlds and teachers and everything else that sarcasm is really a big part of, you know, teen humor and high school teacher humor and everything else, and that fine balance. And it's a fine balance between sarcasm and cynicism, right? And so I always worry, for example, in this profession about, you know, when I see things, you know, online, that at what point are we feeding cynicism and masking it as sarcasm? And I worry about our profession. And I worry about our profession when I think about, you know, young people need to enter this profession. To me, education is a patriotic duty. We are helping the younger generation in our country to try to become good citizens. And so what does that even look like? And so to me, it's, you know, kind of a bigger than me profession.
Yeah, I heard I watched a video about sarcasm, and I can't not remember what they said about sarcasm. I can't, it said something about sarcasm like that. I was watching.
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's a fine line between trying to find that sarcastic humor point and bleeding into, you know, and you have to have a pretty strong relationship for sarcasm to work really well. So uh, not something I would suggest to a first year teacher without knowing kids for sure. So
Yeah, I mean, I had a brother who was in school, and like he doesn't like he grabs emotions, you know, very sensitively.
mhm.
And we went we came across like a teacher who was sarcastic but to young children who doesn't understand sarcasm.
Right.
And so my brother thought that the teacher was actually like being mean to her. Even, I mean, I don't know what her uh like what she was trying to do. I don't know what it was, but she was just being sarcastic to the little kids, and they thought that they were being mean to that the teacher was being mean to them. And then I would hear like cries and stuff like that, and I'm like this is, you know, sarcasm is like for people, you know, who understand it, like you said, for high school teachers and who have like a relationship. But like little kids don't understand sarcasm. So
Yeah,
yeah.
little kids are very literal at times, you know,
Yeah.
and again, I don't, uh, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying it's present at the secondary level as a
Mhm.
way for especially teachers who have good relationships with kids. Sometimes it's a way to connect. I mean, you know, I have one teenager left in my house, and I've watched as she has developed her sarcasm over the last couple of years. And it makes her happy when she gets a good zinger in, you know, kind of thing. But you know, I think it's important to recognize that that's sometimes, sometimes it's also a way that teenagers kind of, I always think teenagers are sometimes still dipping their toe in the childhood waters and dipping their toe in adult waters, and they're trying to navigate those relationships. So it's kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And another question is like, what activities do you enjoy outside of your work?
Well, nothing anymore because we're all locked up, right? So,
Yeah.
well, I was an Aztec basketball season ticket holder. Well, now I just watch the games on TV. Um, my wife and I go to a lot of concerts. We had a number of concerts lined up for the springtime and the summer, and some trips associated with those. Um, can't do that anymore. Uh,
Mm.
I like to eat a lot. I do a lot of hiking around San Diego County. There's San Diego County has a tremendous amount of hiking trails. So uh, when it gets light outside during the week, I'll probably get more consistent again. Right now, I'm down to just about one hike a week. I hike with some friends anywhere from 5 to 15 miles every weekend. That's a good stress reliever. So I do that. And then when we are able to congregate again, I will be going to a lot of concerts again. I have a lot of lot to make up for. So
What is your
Yeah.
favorite music?
I like all sorts of music. Uh, this ev- I meet with a group. My wife and I go with a group from people all over the United States and some people from Canada, and every year descend upon the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
which, if I lived in New Orleans, I would be 500 pounds probably. The food there is ridiculously good, but no, and it's funny because the people will go, I don't listen to jazz, I don't like jazz, but I mean, there's 11 stages there, so there's a lot of different bands um,
Mm,
there this year. So we were lined up to see, like, the headliners there were going to be Lenny Kravitz, the Foo Fighters, and the Who were the three different concerts, the main ones there. Um, and then we were going to see this summer, we were going to see Santana and Earth, Wind, and Fire. And then we were going to go to the Green Day concert at Petco Park.
wow.
It's going to be Green Day and Weezer. So we go to a lot of different stuff. I've seen anything at Jazz Fest. He's passed on now, but at the Jazz Festival, I've seen anybody from like BB King to Steve Miller Band to Smokey Robinson and John Fogerty or whatever. I got tons of different groups. So pretty much any live music, if it's a concert I want to go to, we try to go. Um, you know, Sundays Saturdays and Sundays usually there's like a brass band playing down in Balboa Park. We'll try to go to that even now if they're playing. So pretty much anything. I don't know that I have a one type of favorite.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Probably if I'm leaning somewhere, Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, stuff like that.
Cool. I like those bands.
I'm just sitting here not knowing anything going.
And it's funny because I I'll say certain bands, and a lot of young people don't know them, but
Kylie? No one. Foo
but
Fighters. I
yeah,
heard of them before. Only I think through my dad or something. I heard
yeah,
about them.
exactly.
Yeah.
But and then it's anything. Sometimes I'll go with my kids, I'll tag along, or I'll use them as my excuse to buy random concert tickets. But so uh, I'll hear what they're playing. I don't know. My son is 20, and some of the stuff he listens to, I don't fully always know. And I think my daughter kind of follows in his footsteps with what she listens to. I know some of
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I always follow my mom because that's why I know all those bands that you mentioned and
Yeah.
people. because she listens to a lot of variety of music, and I followed her, and it's just a bunch of classics and rock bands and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, my kids know all that music, and I know some of their music, but like my son will listen to a lot of EDM and stuff like that that
Mhm.
I don't follow. But he's also like a hardcore gamer, and his major in college is computer animation and game design, so he's always into different EDM type music and video game type sounding music, uh,
Yeah.
plus all the other stuff. But I don't know half the stuff he listens to.
Mm. Yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about. I never heard of that type of music before.
Like,
I haven't played video games since I was like in kindergarten or first grade or second grade.
well, he's gonna turn it into a career. So, you know,
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, I don't know that it would be for me, but if that's his path and that's his joy, and you can make a buck along the way, why not?
What
Absolutely.
makes him
Yeah.
happy?
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, I was actually, like, looking into that career too of, like, a game designer because I like video games too, and I'm like, "But I just like playing them, I don't wanna make them." But
Well,
yeah.
one of the cool things I saw that he had to do during his freshman year was it was just game design. So they had to actually design board games so they could even know
Mm,
how games work and strategies and levels of games and things like that. Um, but some of the stuff he's created online has been, you know, it's impressive. But I don't know that I could stare into a computer screen and do all that stuff all day. But
yeah.
but now it's a full-on UC Irvine, UC Santa Cruz, and Cal State Chico in the UC and NCSU system all have that major.
Mm.
Wow.
So,
Have you picked up any like hobbies since like the virus?
um, not really. You know, we've kind of kept our circle small. My parents are in their late 70s, so I try not to go out. So I could go shopping for them and make sure they stay home because they're restless. They want to go do stuff. So I've tried to keep my circle small, so we haven't gone anywhere really. You know, and to be honest, like taking on this job during the middle of the virus has kept me busy. So outside of getting out for a hike, trying to be consistent with being out there and getting a little bit of nature and exercise along the way. Haven't picked up anything new. Um, maybe done a little bit more experimenting with cooking, but that's about it.
Oh yeah, I've been cooking a lot more this year. Yeah. I learned a lot of hobbies this year. I just
Good.
learned on YouTube everything.
Yeah, same.
There you go.
Mhm.
Yeah, so many hobbies.
such as
Mm.
such as
Oh, so knitting. I learned how to knit and I learned how to do embroidery. I also learned how to like play this instrument that my dad said he'll get me if I get all A's. So I'm just waiting for that. Also,
What was
I
the
like to write.
instrument?
It's called a calibia. It is like it's like a piano but for like the thumbs.
oh,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Also been writing a lot of stories, and I
Awesome.
joined like the podcast and bunch of other clubs that are all online.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You've been busy. Absolutely, you have. I'll go ahead and ask the final question then.
Yes, sir.
What do you like most about working for Mountain Empire School District, and how would you say it's different than any other district you've been at?
Well, first of all, I graduated from Mountain Empire High School, so it was kind of a homecoming. I don't live up in the mountains, but I grew up there. So it's the community I grew up in. It's the high school I graduated from. So it's awesome in that regard that I could go back to a community that gave me a lot, and you know use um, you know whatever talents I have and whatever knowledge I have to give back to that community. Um, so that part is really awesome. the flexibility to work in a small, geographically challenging district, the flexibility that the people that I work with have is refreshing. Very few people are rigid at all. People just learn to roll with things. I mean, our school district is 660 square miles and only serves 1,650 kids. So if you're not familiar with the area, it's pretty sparse, and so it provides for a lot of uniqueness. But that's why you have to be flexible working here. So that's I guess some of the things I really like about it. And the people are just great. The how it's different, like for example, the opportunities. It's interesting. The opportunities career wise that you might have in a small school district versus a big one are different. For example, the last school district I worked in has about 20,000 students and has about 11 high schools. And so when I came here, I was the only high school principal in the school district, right? And so every opportunity came my way to develop as an administrator, versus I was one of 70 high school administrators in my last district. So opportunities were kind of spread out. So there's different things like that. If I was in a very large school district, jumping from principal to superintendent probably would not have happened. I would have been sitting in some office doing a bureaucratic job, like, and that might not have been as joyful for me as working directly with people. So the larger school districts, the other thing I would say is a large school district is like trying to steer a battleship, whereas small school districts trying to steer a speedboat. You can make change really quick and you can see it really quick. For example, when I first came in this district, there were 70 total laptops for 450 kids at the high school, and by January of that year I had a Chromebook in every student's hand. That would not happen in a large school district. There's a lot more red tape and a lot more people that along the way that have their hands in something. So it just slows things down to some extent. I don't mean that in a critical way. It's just large organization, small organization, and that's
Right.
just the realities of it. You can make change a lot quicker. So I mean that's probably the biggest difference. Is that how you can make change and how readily you can see it is probably the biggest thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess that would be the end of the podcast right now. So thank you so much for joining with us, Dr. Keeley, and thank you, Cindy Lou and Mr. Smith, for joining us as well. And I hope to see you guys in the next episode. And don't forget to check us out in SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, whatever you can hear podcasts, and you could see it down below. And thank you very much. Bye.
All right. Thanks.
Bye. I hope you have
Bye.
a lovely day.
You too. Take care.